Hello and welcome to True Audio Files. Today, as you saw in the title, going to be talking about Black Sabbath Paranoid. The reason for that is because they have finally, or not finally, because they just recently announced it, but they have released a Rhino High Fidelity version of that, and it sold out immediately after, I think, a day of it being available. So, sad but true, but hopefully they'll release some unnumbered pressings and versions of this, but as all the Rhino High Fidelities are, they were cut from the analog master tapes by Kevin Gray at Coherent. They were pressed at Optimal Records as well. Limited to 5,000, blah, blah, blah. Has a nice gatefold. As you can see here, I would say I want to nitpick about that though for a second, just because the one thing that I had with this, and I don't remember having this issue with some of the other versions, but maybe it's just my perception and my recollection, is that I found that taking the record in and out of that jacket incredibly difficult. And matter of fact, when I first got the record, I wanted to open it up to take a look at it, and I actually ended up damaging the original inner sleeve pretty dramatically because of how complicated and difficult it was to get that record back into the jacket the way it was. So hopefully they rectify that next time around. But anyways, I got that one, and I have two other copies that I have that I wanted to demo it against, and I actually have several versions of Paranoid. I only have 3 vinyl copies of it, but got like a super deluxe CD version of it. I've got a quad version of it. I've got just a regular deluxe version of it that was put out a few years back, and just lots and lots of different variations of it because I just love the album. I think it's great. So I have a pretty good understanding of the album, but the other version that I have that I wanted to test it against it's an early pressing Vertigo. As you can see by the label, got the cool Vertigo label on there. It's in this jacket that I've got on the back here just because the one I bought, actually the jacket itself had some pretty severe water damage. Luckily the record was nearly flawless, and I did some pretty extensive cleaning to make sure that it was as clean as possible. Kind of the interesting note on this that I was told by the owner of the record store that I bought it from, not sure how true it is, but if it's true, it's very cool, is that one and the 2 other early UK versions, pressings I got, one was Black Sabbath and the other one was Volume 4, was that they were originally owned by a priest. So whether that's true or not, I don't know, but I think it's kind of a fun story. So anyway, so I have that one. Like I said, it's not a first pressing, but it's definitely an early pressing of that. And then the last version I have for a vinyl version is, this one came out in 2016, and it's kind of a sort of a deluxe version. I think that's what they probably called it. But anyways, it's a deluxe version of it because it's a 2-record set. It actually comes with, if you can see that, hopefully you can, it comes with some instrumentals, alternate mixes, things on that nature, as well as the first record of just the original album itself. Came in a gatefold as well. Not quite as high a quality of a gatefold as the Rhino High Fidelity, although the records are a lot easier to take in and out of. So those are the 3 records that I have to do the comparison with. And kind of give you an idea of how my process and how I do these record sound quality shootouts is, I try to level match each record. I have a sound level meter, and I try to make sure that I get as even of a volume level on each one of them that I can. So when I switch the records, I make sure that the volume is set to the right volume level on each one to make sure that they all sound equal in terms of sound level volume. Then I also listen to the record, the new record, in this case the Rhino High Fidelity, all the way through to kind of get a sense for which track or tracks I want to listen to as a sound quality comparison. And the interesting thing I found about this with the sound leveling was I decided on War Pigs and also eventually Paranoid, which I'll get into in a second as to why. With War Pigs, it was very weird. There were a lot of fluctuations in the sound volume, which I expected, but I have a option to kind of give an average of the volume on each of these. But I still found as the track went along, it really kind of went all over the place. So I tried to get it as even as possible. The interesting thing is, if you're going by the results of the sound level meter, War Pigs isn't actually even as loud as Paranoid. And when I did Paranoid, I got a different readout or level matches on it. So I actually found when I did War Pigs, there were variations on all of them, and there were slight different adjustments I needed to make from a volume perspective. But on Paranoid, they were all pretty close to the same. So it's kind of odd there. So anyway, that's my take. I wanted to kind of give you a little bit of a brief introduction to what I go through to make sure and get these as equal as possible from a sound level. All right, so I listened to the Rhino High Fidelity all the way through, and initial impressions were I thought it sounded really good. I thought that, there was great bass, there was, good treble. I think clarity was there, good excitement, good punchiness to it, good, what appeared to be some nice dynamics around it. And, if I were to be subjective a little bit, for those of you, for example, who really don't like a lot of treble on your vinyl, you may find this to be maybe a little bit too treble heavy, but I personally like it, and I think it does offer some benefits. I don't think it goes too far on the treble. And so, kind of my take. The pressing, as usual, is very, very good as well, and just had a nice clean sound to it, as much as you can for a recording like this. So next up, I did the Vertigo, and the early UK pressing. And the thing that I found with that one is that definitely had a different sound to it. There was definitely less treble. There was still some there, so it wasn't like it was, void of treble, but it definitely was a lot less. And there was also seems to be a boost in the lower mid-range section. It kind of gave it a nice warm sound to it, but it just seemed like it made the treble not as prevalent. It just gave that impression. And so in general, I think it still sounded very good, but that was the difference between the two in a from a subjective or objective point of view. The sound stage seemed to be pretty identical as well. And so that was the early UK pressing. So then I put on the 2016 version. 2016 version kind of fell in between these two. You had more treble than the UK, but not quite as much as the Rhino High Fidelity, but it also lacked that extra low mid-range as well. But bass was the same or similar, actually similar on all three. If I had to say, I didn't really notice much of a difference from a level on the bass, but I'll talk about the bass and its clarity in a little bit. And so overall, I kind of thought it felt somewhere in the middle of those two. It definitely had a similar, if not identical, sound stage to it. Initially, when I started doing some A/B comparisons back and forth with all the three, I initially had thought that the Rhino High Fidelity was a little bit shallower from a soundstage perspective, but I think it's just the way that it, maybe the treble and the mastering of it. I think it's just how it was perceived, because the more I did an A/B comparison back and forth on it, the more I noticed that it sounded like the soundstage depth was pretty similar. So I decided to just try Paranoid as well, just because of the weird discrepancy I found when I did the sound quality, the sound level meter comparisons. The Paranoid was definitely reading louder, at least on the sound level meter. So, but I listened to that, and one of the things that really happened when I did that is I noticed when I did the comparison that the Rhino High Fidelity definitely had about the same amount of bass as the other two, but that bass definitely seemed to be tighter, more accurate. And so I felt that was a little bit of a advantage to the Rhino High Fidelity. That was just my perception of it. Maybe a little bit subjective because I don't have any way to measure that, but that was what came across to me when I did the A/B comparison, because there's definitely a lot of bass, both bass drum and bass guitar in Paranoid, and that's where it was the most noticeable, where I could really pinpoint and listen to the bass easier between them. And I definitely felt that the Rhino High Fidelity had the more accurate bass, but about the same amount. So overall, my impressions, I would say You know, the Rhino High Fidelity definitely have the most treble, had similar bass to all three of them, had similar mid-range to the 2016 version. The UK definitely had more mid-range, less treble than the other two. You know, the 2016 kind of fell in between. I would say my perception is that the soundstage was pretty similar, but you kind of had a more 3D airiness, if you will, to it, for lack of a better way to describe it, on the High Fidelity. And I definitely felt that the bass was more accurate and tighter sounding on the Rhino High Fidelity. So overall, I definitely feel it's the best sounding version I own. The pressing qualities on them, I would say that actually the 2016 and this current one were very similar. Both were pretty quiet, so I have no problem with the pressings on either of these. The Vertigo early UK pressing was a little noisy, but I don't know if that's just because of its age and how often it was played. It was definitely visually in good shape, so it wasn't that, and it's definitely been cleaned really well. So, but it was a little bit noisier, but it wasn't crazy noisy. But definitely a little bit noisier than these other two. So that's everything I have about these two. I'd love to hear your take. Do you have maybe a first pressing UK or maybe a first pressing USA and you've been able to compare it to the High Fidelity? I'd love to hear your take on it, see what your thoughts are. But that's kind of my take on it. I definitely feel that the High Fidelity, as almost always, really won in this shootout. It definitely was my favorite version of this album for the reasons I gave. So, but I'd love to hear your take. Please make some comments in the comments section. So that's everything I have for this week. I want to thank you for watching. I wanted you to hit that like button if you liked what you saw. Leave some comments in the comment section. I want to thank you for subscribing if you subscribe. If you don't, please do so. And I want you to have yourself a great rest of your day and a great rest of the week. Thanks a lot.